what's the name of this video?
Physics.
Yeah.
Physics, and that's where I'll put in the name head, you know, the lower thirds that pop out, and just say
Chaos in gameplay.
Physics with programmers.
physics, take one.
Physics with friends.
Physics isn't fun if you don't share it.
That's going in the video.
That's on video. So physics. So this really goes back to one of the foundational principles that hasn't been talked about, but I wrote it over a year ago, and it's all finally coming to fruition now in the game. And that is about physics in this game. And there's two parts of that, well, three really. First biggest thing, NVIDIA has done us a huge favor. They've done a lot of stuff helping us to get their entire physics engine integrated into the game. They've bent over backwards. They've been incredible partners. We are using physics on both the client and the server, and on the servers where it really is kicking ass just to handle the sheer number of characters we have. So the two main parts of physics from gameplay, though, are, number one, I'm not a fan of random numbers in games. I mean, random numbers, they have a role. You know, the purpose of them is to make sure that, all right, you know, you and I fight, and it's not always going to come out the same way. And that's not a bad goal, right? I mean, like, you know, there needs to be some uncertainty in there, or what's the point? One of us is just going to say, nope, I'm never going to like engage with that.
It fuzzes the edges of power levels so that, you know, someone who's slightly weaker, if they get lucky, could beat someone slightly stronger.
At the same time, you know, who likes to win or die based on a coin flip? You know, that's...
Exactly. I mean, you know, and a lot of that came from, you know, earlier, like tabletop games, you'd roll a dice because, and then you know, you could also have LARPs where you swing a sword. So, you know, computer games and MMOs have tended to go with the dice option a lot more.
And that's heritage, but those dice were, I mean, those dice were meant to abstract a whole lot of things. That it wasn't that, oh, there's a 50% chance of you hitting. It's, well, you add up all these factors, and roughly the result of those is going to be a 50-50 chance.
Right.
But, and that's great for sitting at a table where you need to expedite stuff, but computers are really good at calculating a lot more stuff.
Right.
And that's why, that to me is where physics comes in, because it is a way of introducing dynamic emergent gameplay and a certain amount of unpredictability without being random. You know, it is, no one's ever going to say, oh, I got screwed by the physics engine making an arbitrary decision. You know, it's a good physics engine, really.
Right.
You're going to hit someone back the same amount of distance every time, so long as you hit them in the same place. And it's not about us randomly determining, you know, what place you hit them. It's about your positioning versus their positioning and timing and all of these things that are deterministic and choices that were made and not at the behest of chaos gods.
Right. And just something as simple as, you know, some guy jumps in between me and my target as I'm shooting an arrow, we're going to have that arrow hit him. And it's not going to hit you. And that makes a difference in gameplay. You know, there was a new outcome that you didn't see. It didn't always just end up with the same % chance to hit. Something happened that's, you know, it's completely legitimate. You're not going to say, oh, I got cheesed by the game engine.
Right.
It's that jerk who jumped in between me screwed up my shot, and you know, it has meaning. It is a story. It's something that happened, you know, something that actually happened in the world, and not something that happened, you know, just because.
Well, I think you hit upon an important topic there, where it's about players being able to do things. You know, the old, you know, going back to tabletop, you know, you'd have the fighters up front, and you have the weaker players in the back, and you know, we've kind of tried to simulate that in MMOs with the tanking and DPS. But I think, you know, the great thing about physics is you can actually start to do things that make sense. You have the heavy people in front; they're going to take the blows, they're going to take the arrows, and you have the more fragile people behind them. You know, and if the archers can, you know, flank them, then that becomes an important aspect of the game, where it's not just, oh, you know, I make sure I have my line of sight, like in other games.
Strategy.
Exactly.
Strategy and emergentness.
Mm.
that's one of those overused, thrown around words, but it's a real thing. I'm wearing my old Antique Myth shirt from 2001, but that was a game that really did it great, and there was a lot of stuff that was just unpredictable there. Give me that. like there were guys where like you would kill them, and they would drop their weapon on the ground, and someone else chucked a fireball or something into where that was, and that weapon's gonna fly somewhere else, and it's gonna hit Rob in the face, and Rob's gonna take damage. And again, this isn't something where a random number generator said Rob takes damage. That sucks. Rocks fall, everyone dies. That's no fun. But yeah. Well, maybe it is for Rob. I don't know.
No. And I think with that one of the places that physics really shines through is that everything's going to be different, or it's going to be different every time, not because a random number generator says so, but because the initial conditions are slightly different, and that causes maybe this rock to go this way instead of the other way, and it can completely change the outcome just based on small changes like that.
But it's in a way that's transparent to players.
Yeah.
Right. Like, everyone who saw that can tell the story about, ha ha ha, Rob got hit in the face by a sword that someone else dropped.
Right.
And, it's meaning. It's a thing that happened that's unique to Rob.
Yeah, and it lets you take ownership of cool, memorable events. It wasn't the RNG that, made Rob take a sword to the face. It was, Andrew throwing his sword and Brian blowing up his sword that, there were two people that made this happen, and it wasn't, some ephemeral force.
Right.
Yeah, and it's definitely entirely up to the players to dictate how these initial conditions play out. And if you have any set of initial conditions, the same thing will happen every time. That's great. It's just that through player interactions, you're almost never going to have the same exact conditions again.
So that's really where it comes down to, at the philosophy of, gameplay you can't always know in advance is good. Purely random gameplay is, it's cheap.
Well, it's been done to death too. I mean, one of the things we want to do with Camelot Unchained is we want to do things, BSC things. We want to do things that other games haven't had the ability or the motivation to do. I think that putting in especially a client server game, we're all very experienced developers here. We know the problems with latency and and having to simulate physics on the server. Like you said, the physics engine has really helped us to be able to do that. Have a very accurate simulation going on both the client and server, and we can do this type of thing. We don't have to rely on the random numbers like other games have had to do.
Right, and that kind of comes also back to the second part of what I wanted to talk about, which is full physics simulation on the server. And this is a place where NVIDIA's, again, they've been a great partner to us. We brought in physics, and it didn't work great out of the box for the sheer number of players we tried to throw into it, and they've worked really hard with us, and we've made some changes, they've made some changes, and we're in a place where we really are simulating all the characters on the server all the time. And that has big implications not just for how the game plays when you're playing it right. It has big implications for people who want to play their game wrong. And I'm talking about cheaters, I'm talking about wall hackers, I'm talking about speed hackers. You cannot do that in our game. It's it is fundamentally impossible to speed hack because you're moving around on your client, and your client suggests to the server where he wants to be, but the server's doing, again, a full physics simulation of your character and everyone else's characters.
With constraints on what you can and can't run through, and how fast you can move, and all of the things that you would expect, real physics to limit an object moving through the world.
Okay, so I'm just going to take 1 second to show you why it's so important that we actually run our collision on the server. So what I've got here is a set of 3 clients. This one right here is logged in as a Tuatha. Then this guy here is a Frost Giant, keeping an eye on that Tuatha over there. This one up here is standing up on the ledge, keeping an eye on him too. And you can see as I run around here, we've got collision. I can't run into a wall. I can't run into him. I jump up and down, and I land on the ground, and all of those important things that, you know, every game does. But secretly, this Dwatha over here is a dirty cheater. So, and he's going to use his special hacked client to turn off all of his collision and do all sorts of bad things. And so what you're going to see here is he's going to slowly move forward and just take a walk into this wall. And he's inside the wall where he shouldn't be able to be, but you can see down here from the point of view of all the other players and from the point of view of the server, he's just humping the wall. You can't do that. So he can go in here all he wants, but, you know, over here, I can just walk up to where his real legal position is and just wail on him. And, you know, that's what happens to dirty cheaters in our game. A couple more things that I can't do. Come out of the wall. Let's say that, you know, I want to go deep down inside the ground and maybe scoot around all over the world. And now the server is doing its best to, you know, you can see here the server is doing its best to take me to a place that I should be, but, you know, it's not letting me actually do this. And again, you know, I can just walk up and beat on this loser. And, you know, the Frost Giant here, giving the Tuatha what he deserves. Other things that you cannot do. Speed hack. Look how fast I'm going. And, you know, you can see on the client, on the other clients here, even though I may be running fast, the server's running slow and trying to keep up with me. I cannot run faster than that because, again, the server is in control of all the physics and all the character movement. How about I fly? And you see, you know, the server does throw me up a little bit because I'm allowed to jump. Vertical velocity is allowed, but ultimately gravity takes over. And, you know, this position that the other characters, where the other characters see me, is my real position. And there's no getting away with, you know, flying or anything like that. So what about collisions with other characters? Well, you see here the entire Frost Giant football line. Now, I should never be able to run through this line unless you know, my teammates help me take these guys down. This is an impenetrable wall of frosty blue beef. But, you know, again, unless I am a dirty cheater and I try and turn my collision off on the client and run right through these guys. And you can see what's happening on all the other clients and on the server position. I can't go through this. You know, the server says I'm still stuck on the outside of this line, and you know, I am about to get blue beefed. Look at me. I'm a cheater, and I'm getting wailed on. So that's the way it should be. And if you're playing other games where people are teleporting through the ground or zooming all over the world or wall hacking or speed hacking or fly hacking or general dumbass hacking, I'm calling out the rest of the MMO game development community. CSE says, fix your shit.
So, and this is vitally important for a competitive game, you know, a game where we want players to be, you know, join a realm and fight against each other. You know, if cheating absolutely destroys that type of thing. And so we want the you know, having the physics, having the server being able to model a lot of things accurately, you know, eliminates a lot of concerns, I think. And you know, it's really, you know, as an avid PvP player, you know, that's great knowing that the other person is not cheating. Again, it goes back to the agency. You know, it's always easy to say, oh, I lost, so you know, obviously the other person is cheating. That can't happen.
There's a little bit about cheating is like even if you're not up against someone who's cheating, if you're in a world like ours where there's all these variable factors, you know, and something crazy happens, there's a lot of times in the back of your head it was, you know, something crazy happened and I lost the fight. Was it because someone was cheating? And, you know, yes, you lose some of the excuses, and there'll always be that, but it's also cool to know that, you know, someone beat me because, you know, the situation that we were in, the initial conditions or whatever, you know, they played better, they took more advantage of the conditions, and I think it gives more value to success and to taking advantage of opportunities.
Or, you know, it just was something really dumb happened. You know, like one of my favorite scenes in The Lord of the Rings is when the commander of the Goblin armies is there in the siege of Pelennor Fields, and the huge chunk of masonry comes flying in and lands right beside him. And how does the battle change if it lands on him?
Right.
And again, that's not randomness. He could have gotten out of the way, but no. And
from range,
meaningful.
you know,
Yeah.
from range, it could have been a half a degree would have made all the difference in the world. A very minuscule difference of the initial input conditions could have, you know, created an entirely different outcome.
Right.
And you know, it's a movie. It's cinematic. It's meaningful. It has emotional resonance of you saw what happened, and you know, you guarantee, you know, any orcs that do not get cleaned out by, you know, the Rohirrim or the army of the dead, then they're going to they're going to be telling about how that guy just stood there,
Right.
you know, total orc balls,
Right.
And I don't actually know, but then, anyway. I should know this. I've memorized the Silmarillion,
Right.
but anyway. He just stood there, so confident, so cool, and you know, that is like, it's a story that is written in the game, and that's to me, that's the core of the game we're making. You know, it is the one where every player is going to be writing their own story through their interactions with the world.
Exactly. Where you're not exploring our story that we've written out for you. You know, the PvP in this game is you tell your stories. You're the actors and the storyteller.
Exactly. So, I mean, one of the things that Rob and I have been working on recently has been, with relation to physics, has been the interaction systems with magic. I think that's really interesting. I think Mark and Ben are going to go into, you know, a little more of the details on that. But you know, we're really using that physics engine. You know, when you have two casters casting projectiles at each other and they collide, there's going to be something happening besides just, oh, they pass. You know, it's not necessarily going to be they pass through each other and hit their targets. It could be they collide and, you know, maybe a fireball and a water ball create a steam cloud, and that'll change the battlefield too as well. And I think that's going to be really interesting because, you know, magic, you know, kind of going back to random number generators, magic tends to be a little too predictable because we have the dice behind the scenes and we all understand how dice goes. But once you kind of throw physics into there and you have the interesting interaction between different magical effects like we want to have, then all of a sudden magic becomes a lot more chaotic feeling.
And it also means it's not just about how much damage your spell does. It's about how quickly the effects move and how big the effects are to increase their chances of interacting with other casters' effects or other projectiles like arrows or whatever.
It makes more things matter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, your choices matter, really. You know, casting a fireball versus a water ball at that specific time could have a major difference, not just because, oh, he's got a fire debuff or he's got a water debuff or whatnot. It could be, oh, my fireball, you know, hit that steam cloud and it turned into something else, or my water ball hit that steam cloud and turned into something else, and that affects the battle, you know, and it's all those little things. And then somebody else casts a spell, and if you would have cast the other spell, there would have been a different effect. It can be really interesting, and I think that also for the casters, you know, all of a sudden, again, their choices matter. You can start strategizing. It's almost like you can think about casting magic almost like a game of chess. Well, if they do this and I do this, then they're going to have this effect, and then if they, you know, then I have my friend get ready to do this. If that does happen, and then you can have a really interesting combat that's not necessarily predictable.
Have you ever done any fencing?
Yes.
Okay, I was like, that is so the fencer point of view, because you're thinking in terms of the action stack almost, you know, where like, all right, I am going to do this, and there's two ways he could counter that. If he does counter A, then I'm going to do this in response. If he does, I mean, you're playing a move tree out in your head.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly. I think that's that becomes a lot more interesting than mash fireball button. Or do my rotation. What Mark's mentioned before.
Fuck rotation.
Right. Right.
Let's just say it. Fuck rotations.
Instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's boring. But all of a sudden it's like, okay, I've got these resources. I've got my spells. I'm going to cast them in a way that's going to help. They create a cloud. I'm going to cast a wind spell, or they've created fire. I'm going to put out the fire,
or incoming.
Right.
What is there?
Right. Exactly. And again, I think it goes back to that the foundation that we talked about. Your choices matter.
Well, and if you're playing in, more of a support role, it's, you have the options of, I can let Brian take the damage and make his health bars go back up, or is there some kind of magic that I can use to deflect the steam cloud that's coming at him, or there's a giant rock coming at us, let's just get out of the way of that.
I'm a big fan of the giant rock. Straight up Indiana Jones stuff.
And I think one of the important things with that is it's not just a matter of source destination, you hit button and a fireball hits the target. It matters every moment that it's in flight.
The journey is what matters.
Yeah, in a sense that is exactly true. You can now fire a fireball that intercepts a rock, and I guess the fireball probably wouldn't fare too well in that case.
Giant rock. I think Andrew still wins.
Right.
But the point is, that's something
also
that you have to consider.
we're announcing a new class in the game. It's a rhinoceros on wheels with a jetpack.
Cast fireballs at that.
I guess that would qualify as a siege weapon if we actually. We're not doing it.
But the thing is, we could do that though. With the
For my indie side game, rhinoceros on wheels.